What's up, suckers? It's me. I'm back, and I'm not sick with the flu this time. I was really hoping to have something up last week, but my husband decided to share everything with me, everything, including his horrible, debilitating sickness. But I'm here, I'm back, and I thought that this would be the perfect time for us to talk about some of the productivity advice that's out there and maybe try to make it a little bit more ADHD friendly. So let's get into it. So before I get started, Happy New Year, first off. Hope it's been amazing for you so far. And if this is your kind of thing, if getting help with understanding ADHD brains and understanding how to kind of change your day-to-day with the brain you have is your kind of deal, then please like and subscribe, whether you're watching this or listening to it. It helps cool people find me, helps me find cool people, and that just makes my day every time. Before we get into it, I want to kind of talk a little bit about what productivity is. So a lot of people tend to think that productivity is getting everything on their to-do list done, and that is how you know you've been productive. I come from a different mindset in that we don't all have enough energy or focus. We just don't have the focus or the energy needed to get everything done that we want to get done every day. And so putting that kind of as our pinnacle, as our gold standard for productivity is unfair to us and also really, really unrealistic. So instead, I like to tell people that productivity is not perfection, it's satisfaction. For me, what productivity is the feeling that your progression throughout the day is good. It's satisfaction with what you've gotten done. Now, obviously, some of this is going to have to do with your own mindset, your own outlook, but some of it does just have to do with how you attack your day and the actual tasks that you do. And that's going to take us right into the first bit of advice that I tend to hear. I've been hearing it a lot more lately. Some people will say, eat the frog, which basically just means to do the hardest thing first. And for some people, even for some ADHDers on some days, this is fine advice. It's fine to try. But most days, our brains tend to seize up when we are trying to do something we don't want to do. So telling us to eat the frog or to do the hardest thing first is more likely to lead us into a day of kind of feeling inert and dissatisfied because we didn't get the thing done that we really wanted to get done. And having that attitude is, I believe, part of the reason why so many of us sometimes wind up doing things at the last minute, because it's not pressing enough in the moment and we need that extra urgency to even get us moving. So if you are trying to do something that you really, really just don't want to do, I don't suggest eating the frog first, actually. If we are sticking with that metaphor and you've got a meal in front of you and you've got the frog on the plate, and then you've got delicious dessert and a roll and I don't know, salad, and you're just kind of like eating around that frog, you are actually closer to what I think we need to be doing than what that productivity advice suggests. What I suggest is actually opening up your day, opening up that productivity time with an easy win. Bonus points if it's something that you really like to do. The reason being, if you are able to start your day with something that you're actually looking forward to getting done, or that's just really easy to do, your brain will automatically kind of get into this flow, right? It'll get into the feeling of actually getting things done. And that way, when you are ready to start eating the frog, right? You're ready to start in on the part of the meal, the part of the to-do list that is the most unpleasant, you kind of already know that you can do this thing because you've already done some things and you're kind of already in this movement, this flux And it's a lot easier to keep moving, to keep using that momentum than it is to try to go straight from just inertia to doing something that you absolutely hate doing, especially if you have ADHD. So try to have one or two things first that you know are just going to be easy wins, that are going to take very little energy for you, that you might even really like doing, and actually put that difficult task as like third or fourth in your day. Just be mindful of how your energy ebbs and flows, and make sure that you don't set it up right after lunch, because then you're going to have a really hard time eating that frog when you want a nap. Okay, so next. This is people say it different ways, but it always comes down to prioritize. That's all you need. Just prioritize, everyone. And it's like, yes, prioritization is very important. It's very important. But ADHD brains can't just prioritize. We struggle with that because, especially when it comes to prioritization and putting things in line and putting things in order, our brains work best visually. We can't just prioritize. That's hard to do. It's not something that we just intrinsically know how to do. So while prioritization is important, I suppose that I should say that this isn't necessarily bad advice, but it is incomplete advice, especially if you have ADHD. What I would suggest instead is that you first make sure that everything that needs to be done that day is in front of you, that you have written it all down. And before you even start prioritizing, you want to take into account when things are due, because if there's one thing that without fail I have found every time that I work with a client, it's that they will think that they have 19,000 things to do that day because they just can't stop thinking of 19,000 things. And so they assume that if those things are top of mind, they must be due today. But the moment that we sit down and we start talking about time constraints and due dates, they suddenly realize that they actually have more like 3 or 4 or 5 things to do that day. And 5 is on the top end. So first, I want you to think about due dates before you even start thinking about prioritization, because more than likely, what you think you have due is actually not due right now, like it feels. Then after due dates, then prioritize. But don't prioritize according to how scared you feel or how frustrated you are that you haven't done it yet. Go according to when it is actually going to need to be done by. And that may sound super simple, and you may be looking at me like, you ass, obviously. But no, because I'm going to tell you right now, I have worked with people who have started working on prioritization, and they'll say, this needs to be done now, it's urgent. And I'll say, okay, but according to whose deadline? And so they'll tell me, well, it's urgent according to me because I'm just really frustrated by the fact this hasn't been done yet. That doesn't mean it's urgent. That means that you're frustrated and it probably feels urgent, but it's not actually an urgent priority. So actually think about, instead of thinking about it in terms of subjective, think objectively. Can I get away with not doing this today without freaking myself out tomorrow trying to get it done last minute? Can I do the next step of this project if I don't get this step done first? Who do I need to talk to? Is this person going out of town? So that means that I have to do it today to talk to this person to get this thing done. Think about those things instead. Don't necessarily think about how it makes you feel. And I know that this is difficult, but don't think about how it makes you feel. Think about where this actually is going to fit in life and whether or not it actually needs to get done now versus later, in comparison to the other things that you might have on your list that are actually due today. So next on the list is to avoid multitasking. And I understand where this is coming from because especially with ADHD brains, we get distracted so easy. Like, I get it. But that being said, ADHD brains don't do well when we are forced to focus on just one thing for long periods of time with no break. We can't do that. We can't. And so that means that instead of choosing to just focus on one thing and not allow yourself to focus on anything else. If you really want to work with your brain, you got to do it in spurts. That could be the Pomodoro technique, but if you don't want to go down that road, you could even just try to time block it so that, you're giving yourself an hour to work on one thing, but then you get to get up from your desk and work on something else. I have found recently that probably one of the most helpful things is, if you work from home, to try to mix in work and then house chores or housework or household work. I have a client who hates the word chores, so whatever term you want to use. I suggest sitting down and saying, okay, for an hour I'm going to work on, this thing for work, but then I'm going to get up and I'm going to go, sweep the floor. And then I'm going to come back and I'm going to work a little bit more on work. And what this does is it kind of gives you the feeling of focusing on one thing while also giving you the joys of multitasking. But this can even also just be, I have friends and coworkers, or colleagues I should say, who love to just put on shows that they have watched 9,000 times in the background while they do things. I honestly haven't quite looked into the science behind this yet, but ADHD brains really honestly do enjoy chaos. We enjoy, or we work best when our minds are subjected to multiple different types of stimuli at once. Now, obviously there's a thin line there between multiple different kinds of stimuli and still being able to focus, and also multiple different kinds of stimuli and not being overwhelmed. So you have to be very careful about this. But I guess what I'm saying is, if you're like, I can't multitask, I gotta sit here and I gotta focus on this one project, this one thing until it's done, and then you're wondering why you can't stay focused on it for more than 15-20 minutes, it's probably because your brain's not built that way. You are not built to just focus on something for that long. So instead, work with your brain. Stop trying to force it to focus for that long, and figure out ways to multitask that do not cause you to step over that line and become overwhelmed, or step over that line and completely lose focus. And that's going to take a little bit of trial and error. That's definitely going to take a little bit of answering questions about yourself. But it's very important that you realize that multitasking, or taking in those multiple forms of stimuli, can actually help you to focus better than they can hinder you. This one I'm only going to speak on very, very briefly, but to-do list. Again, this is another one that I feel is incomplete, not necessarily bad, but incomplete. To-do lists are important, but with ADHD, you can't just launch into a to-do list. The thing is, if you ask an ADHDer what the most important things are to do today, chances are what they write down is not actually going to be what they need to get done today, and they're going to finish up their day feeling like they didn't do the things they actually wanted to do. So instead of just launching straight into a to-do list, I want you to sit down and brain dump first. And you will hear this everywhere, and you're always like, oh, brain dump. Maybe you're tired of it. Maybe you think brain dumps are overwhelming and stupid, and that's fine if it doesn't work for you. But be sure that when you are brain dumping, again, that you are being realistic with when these things are actually due. Just because they feel urgent or they feel important does not mean they need to be done today. Great example would be, I need to sweep my bathroom. This is important to me. Every time that I look at my bathroom, I feel frustrated that I can't sweep. But if I have other things on my list that need to go first, it needs to go first. It's not more important, for example, than answering emails from clients. It's not more important than going and picking my kids up from camp. There are things that are more important. So definitely when you're doing that to-do list, just remember that the to-do list should be the final step, not the first step. And finally, this is, I think, probably, I'm pretty sure that this was yelled by however long productivity gurus have been around. Probably someone was yelling this at Jesus back in the day. they'll tell you don't procrastinate. And it is not that simple. I think every person with ADHD knows that. Just not procrastinating is just not that simple. So making this a little bit more ADHD friendly for you, may I suggest that if you catch yourself procrastinating, instead of saying, oh, I've messed up, I want you to remember that procrastination does not mean that your day's over. And it does not mean that you failed. And it does not mean that you can't still get a little bit done that you wanted to get done. And that also, depending on the situation, if you're procrastinating because you're tired, there is nothing morally reprehensible about that. It means that you're tired. In fact, I would definitely suggest that instead of looking at procrastination as some sort of failure, that you approach it, and I'm stealing this term from Nikki, one of the nutritionists that I work with, approach that procrastination with curiosity. Ask yourself why you're procrastinating and be realistic about it. Maybe you're procrastinating because you just really don't want to do it. And in that case, you've got a frog, right? And we've kind of talked about how to beat that frog. Maybe you're procrastinating again because you're tired and that's something that you need to deal with. Maybe you're procrastinating because you're hungry. Maybe you're procrastinating because you're actually deep down inside not interested in doing whatever it is anymore and you have the option to choose not to. But just saying don't procrastinate is kind of impossible. You're going to have days where you're going to procrastinate. Even neurotypical people and people with that ADHD procrastinate. So the question isn't how not to procrastinate, it's how to get out of that procrastination. And honestly, the best way for you to answer that is to ask yourself why, and then to handle it as best you can in the ways that you know might get you out of it. So there you have it. Hopefully that is helpful to you. I am really glad to be back. I'm excited to help you guys out some more this year. Got a lot of stuff coming up that I can't wait to share. Thank you very much for watching. Drink plenty of water, take care of yourself, and I'll see you in the next video.